If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking about
die for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those movies, those yet unborn, and those who are the
How
ancestors.
long is your list?
So the connection with the ancestors is tied into the tribal self.
Panther 48.
What does that mean? That means that the tribal self constantly reminds us
Willing to die for.
that we don't have the
How
right
long is your
to
list?
claim independence.
Panther 48.
All right, now for this, what I'm about to do is share the screen, and I'm gonna show y'all a few things. Now, this also goes back to something that David Foreman mentioned on the show he was on with us last, and was basically saying that he feel like one of the mistakes that I made in regards to the national was not releasing the structure to the general public, because by doing so will hold the N.B.P.P accountable for what people know that they are supposed to know and how they are supposed to operate. So today I'm going to give y'all a taste of what that is, so if people are aware. Because the fact is, when the community knows what a Panther is supposed to be, then a Panther has to in turn live up to the expectations in what they are supposed to be. And that's one of the whole aspects of suppressing information, which was what was done to the national, by the national at the time, to the local chapters, because they wanted to keep them under their grip. And so those are the things that I continually try to fight against. So now let me go ahead and share the screen, and then we're going to talk a little bit about this. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
All right, so the first thing here is, the first aspect is, this is what we were working with initially in terms of the operation. You had your cities that had the local chapters. The local chapters operated through a state, and then you had the regional central committee, and then you had the regions that formed the national, and then we had other political formations that are supposed to be working with us to establish what do you see? A provisional government. That provisional government in turn will work with an international central committee and flow through other nations. This is how it was proposed, part of how it was proposed in terms of operating. Now, the thing that a lot of people wouldn't recognize, that don't make sense to them, may be the fact that we talk about other formations actually operating within alongside of the central committee that worked under a provisional government. So even from that standpoint, the N.B.P.P was not supposed to be its own entity in allowing someone and the chairman be at the top of the helm. But even that was supposed to fall under a provisional government, and that provisional government at the time, what we was working through was the Republic of New Africa. So in essence, that was supposed to be the structure in which the New Black Panther Party would start falling under, because point number 10 on the platform stated that we are supposed to be working toward a what? Nation state. That's what people don't even recognize now. If you go back to the 10-point platform that they operate on, the New Black Panther Party, and now all I'm talking about is some of the holes that are in there. When you say you're going to a nation state, that means you need to be talking about a provisional government. Nowhere in any of the document of the Black Power Manual does it teach anything about provisional government. That's because aspects are missing. Now, the next part of this, it goes into what E was talking about. At the very top, what do you see? African Unity Council. That is what is supposed to be at the very top. Through that, there's supposed to be two branches that eventually would be formed. Whereas you have a military wing, and then you have a governmental wing. In the middle would be your chiefs of staffs. So Oftentimes, one of the things that I used to hate that was done and said wrong, that was way out of context, was you hear people call either Khaled or, and then they started calling Malik, the Black Power General. How can you be a general and a chairperson at the same time? Something ain't right about just even saying that. And then where is the chief of staff operating from that standpoint? And what you see here is also chief of scientific studies that work and develop the Office of Development for the government, and then Office of Research for the military. These are the things that I was attempting to try to get us to work toward. From that, you would have what we call the mechanism structure, and we'll go into that a little bit further. But the initial aspects of the mechanism structure had the infrastructure mechanism, which at the helm of that, you jump down and you have Minister of Justice on one side for the military branch and Minister of Politics on the government side. Through that, you flowed and had your economic mechanism, community mechanism. For the right side, for the left side, you had the defense mechanism and information mechanism. And then through that, you flow down into your other mechanisms, other mechanisms and other operations. And then from there, you eventually get to what we call the African state. And then we would operate through ranking membership to create liberation zones. And then also you create from that standpoint African communities and then African black cells, and then that will flow to the new African people. So these are the kind of things that the new Black Panther Party members never saw in a membership manual, which are the things that was attempting to get pushed nationally to help develop a structure. So again, this is just the same thing blown up to show you how that structure is. And so folks at home, you can stop the video and look at that chart. Now I want to talk a little bit more about the different mechanism aspects. So again, we had then at that point in time, we had the infrastructure mechanism, defense, information, community, and economic. And then we had the different departments and and leaders over those departments that should operate those. So in name, at the very top, infrastructural council, which we call the elder calibrator. And from that standpoint, basically that means that the elders are responsible for making sure the organization operated accordingly and people were held accountable according to what they're supposed to do. Now, the internal operations is supposed to be held by the local chief of staff, whereas the external operations are held by the chairperson. And the chairperson can be a male or female, which is why it's referred to as person as opposed to chairman. Minister of Justice falls under that on the left side. Minister of Politics falls on it on the right side. From there, you have the Community Liaison Officer, Minister of Community Programs, Field Chancellor, Field Secretary, Block Organizers. On the left side, you had your Minister of Defense, Minister of Health, Field Marshal, and Field Medic. And then you had your Staff Sergeants that fall into that. The next tier would create what we call the Minister of Culture, MOC. At that point in time, that's what it was referred to. Minister of Information. Then you had your Field Commander and your Field Scholar. And then commanding officers to oversee the tasks and duties. And on the right side, you had your Minister of Business Development, Minister of Finance, Field Project Manager, most people never even heard of, Field Economists, and then Resource Developers. And so these are things that were left out of the membership manual. And so in talking more on that within the Infrastructure Council, the infrastructure directs chapter development via elder board liaisons. The Infrastructure Council will assist in mechanisms with generational foundational growth, critical analysis, and future momentum to set a cornerstone of empowerment. All relationships of the core, which we would get into, work through and towards full Black Panther continuity, and therefore must adhere to the Elder Council advisory input. So kind of going into some of what he's already saying, this is what was presented and what was supposed to be going on to the national. And these are the things that I was teaching that got me in trouble by the national. And the goals are to repair the linkage between the elder, middle generation, and youthful Black Panthers. And the bottom line with that is, again, like we said, some of the elders that were part of the third development were operating within the ranks of the new Black Panther Party, knowing way more in terms of what it means to be a Panther than a lot of the young heads. But because of the way the national structure was operating, you had people in charge that was basically ignoring and downplaying and shooting aside the wisdom of some of the elders and what they brought to the table. as well as the community programs that should be going on. And then from there, we have several positions, and I'm not going to read that again. You can stop the video and see this, but different positions, and this is not all of them, that would basically go into the local operations. And notice also how we say field marshals, field scholars, field chancellors, project managers, youth ministers, field economists, field secretaries, commanders, medics. So these are positions that multiple people may have, depending on how the operation goes. Another thing that is left out is what we call skill levels. This goes into the training that must be done to the membership. Skill level number 1 is what everybody that says that they think they want to be a Panther must go to. Required to become rank and file in the rank and file membership, period, point blank. You had to at least go through skill number 1 to even be able to say that you was a Black Panther, to be accepted in the ranks. And moving in today's time, what we deal with now in San Diego under the Black Panther Party is that before you can even once you become a member through skill level number 1, before you even earn your beret, you have to have so many amount of hours of community service first, and then you get your beret. So you don't get your beret just because you finish skill level number 1. Now that you've learned what it takes to be a Black Panther, you have to show and prove that you're going to put in the community work that it takes to be a Black Panther before you get your beret. And that ain't got nothing to do with protesting, nothing at all. Level number 2, required to run a service program. You have additional training that is required just for you to be able to say, hey, I'm going to run a service program. Skill level number 3, required to hold a leadership position within a chapter. Skill level number 4, required to hold a regional level position. Number 5 was required to hold a national position. And number 6, required to establish international relations and assist with formation of international chapters. So these are the kind of things that wasn't even taught in the Black Power Manual, but have been around. Another thing that throws people off that they don't get is the difference between framework and methodology. A framework is a foundational concept that holds the chapter together. The rules, regulations, 10-point platform, bylaws, orders, and local objectives. That is the framework. The methodology is a process of steps, to carry out the goals, which are the 3 Ds, the 3 Ps, organizational structure, the mechanisms, PE classes, and skill level training. A lot of the members don't even know what it means to deal with the 3 Ps. They've heard of the 3 Ds because that's define, develop, and defend, and that made it into the local objectives, but not the 3 Ps, which is perception, pursue, and preserve. Those have to coincide with the 3 Ds in order to make them effective. So that was left out of the manual. Moral Panther ideological integrity. How often do you hear that? That goes into what Brother E was also talking about. Let me say it again. Moral Panther ideological integrity, which is addressed by the bylaws, rules, regulations, and leadership oaths. Some of the oaths were added in the Black Power Manual, but not all of them. And those oaths, with those oaths come responsibilities and accountabilities, and also what was a part of it that I believe did not make it in the Black Power Manual, or if it did, very limited information did, was that each person, once they get a leadership position, they had 90 days to prove that they could operate within that position before they actually got promoted to that position, and was a list of skills, duties, and requirements in order to carry out that position. Next point, types of orders. This is something else that it more than likely did not make it in the Black Power Manual. Definitely didn't make it in the first editions. General orders, which everybody talks about all the time, but that's typically all you ever hear them talk about. Specific orders are supposed to be on the table. Special orders, committee orders, local command orders, regional orders, and national orders. And there are more orders than that. But the point being, orders, period, have to do with specific operations and guidelines that a person is supposed to follow while operating in the field or doing the duty that you're supposed to do. So there are supposed to be actual orders given to everybody according to what they're dealing with. Now we get into the essence of what we brought to the table within the Panther 48 as well. New Black Panther Party mechanism structure. The cores, these are breaking down what we call cores. Core stands for Kinetic Operation Resistance Engagement. The first original segment core was the field corps, brought into operation by Dallas Chief of Staff, Brother Sight. So Brother Syke, like he mentioned earlier, he brought the field corps into fruition in Dallas, which was the defense mechanism, resource mechanism, community mechanism, and information mechanism. It was later changed to resource mechanism from economic mechanism because we started realizing that people were forming and turning into black capitalists. So what we needed to do is separate the aspects of economics and what people refer to as money from the actual resources that it takes in order to make a community intact. And so we needed people to think on a broader level than it just being how to make money. So it has to do with the resources. Defense mechanism says directs the party defense, security, health, fitness, and social readiness. Critical thinking. That's where you introduced it to critical thinking, which goes back to skill level number 1. The very first thing that should be introduced to anybody wanting to be a Panther is critical thinking. Under the resource mechanism, deal with the identification and utilization of resource development, control, and design. Community mechanism operates all external affairs, relations, and community service programs. So, if you have a community mechanism, you must have service programs in the community. If you don't have service programs, you can't have a community mechanism, period. Information mechanism generates information. Propaganda handles the political and academic education. Notice we talk about politics and academics because you got people walking around who don't have enough education to be able to even operate within a certain level. And so we need to help work on that. Now, this is the element that was added later that was definitely fought for, and I kept trying to fight tooth and nail to get added, which was what we call the continuity core. From that, we had the infrastructural mechanism, which is the foundation, which houses the curriculum and body of resources, which go back to the information and all of the documents and all of the types of training and all of the SOPs that are supposed to be carried within each chapter. The architect mechanism, which is we call our advancement, employs our design via social re-engineering, mind you, pattern recognition, and other forms of building. Now, the institution mechanism, we call generational wealth, refers to our conducive skill fostering and growth of ingenuity. So all of these things together come up and create what we call the continuity cores. So these are the things that are, again, left out of the information that was supposed to have been provided to new Black Panther Party members. From that, we got what we call the life core. And verse 1 on there is the identity mechanism. Contribution of Dallas, MOI, Brother E. This is why you always hear him talking about culture, culture, culture. And so the identity mechanism which brings forth culture, because unless we have a proper knowledge of self in our best efforts, we will emulate our oppressor. Bottom line, if you don't know what you're fighting for as a Black Panther, and because you don't have knowledge of self and you don't respect and have an understanding of culture, nothing else is going to make sense. Next one, laboratory mechanisms, handles our research, experimentation, and development. That is where what I was attempting to bring to the stage and move us outside of just the basic aspects of basic community service. So it had to do with what we talked about earlier, how when we said that what the third development brought, what the new Black Panther Party was going to do was going to elevate based upon having that initial foundation and build from there. So the idea here is that we was going to take Aaron Michaels and all of the things that he was teaching and where he left off was to take the essence of what the 10-point platform was, spread it out, make it a 14-point platform, and then from there be able to even move further and start adding the meat and potatoes onto the structure, which is where the Panther 48 came in. Next one being the engineering mechanism, which controls the ingenuity, talents, labor, scientific advances, and means of production. Because everything that we say when we talk about Black power don't mean a damn thing if we don't have a life core. Don't mean a damn thing if we're not producing and becoming producers and empowering the community. So these are the things that the local chapter is supposed to know as memberships of the party, and these are the kind of things that they are supposed to be implementing and working towards. Last thing here is what we call the survival core. And this has to do with how we engage our people, because this is where we find the community. This is where we find folks in disarray. First one being what we call the coping mechanism, which explores the glues. What are the glues? Glues have to do with how most people all see themselves operating, which is either guessing, lucky, understanding, or through emotions and survival. So those are what we call the glue factors. The glue factors is where our people are, because most people are guessing their way through life in terms of what's going on, and then when something good happens to them, they refer to it as luck. Because why? Because it hadn't been intentional design, because they didn't intend nor did they plot out a direct path of empowerment, so they got lucky. And then understanding what that basically means, that through the basic educational system that the enemy provides you, they teach you to understand something. Whereas as a people, if we want to rise above our oppressor and be able to put ourselves in a position, like we say on our platform, and deal with self-sustainability and self-determination, we have to be able to understand and overstand. So we can't simply just understand and think we're going to be free and work toward liberation, or even have the mentality to study liberation. And then the next one being emotion, because too many decisions are made off of emotion. Too many things that we do in a community and as an individual is based upon our emotional state as opposed to logic. Next, the last one being survival, because we are in a state of survival as a people as opposed to living. Also, when we talk about the community survival programs of the third development, the point is that they are supposed to transition into living programs. And we recognize that within the New Black Panther Party founding principles. And so therefore, the essence of doing these programs had to be a course of elevating. At some point in time, the Black Panthers are supposed to pull back from these, and the community is doing it themselves. And then we start elevating and raising the community. And before you know it, you look back and that community is being self-sufficient. So survival must turn into living. So the coping mechanism is where we see ourselves with that. Now, self-displacement mechanism addresses the conditions of emotional traumas, psychops, and addictive destructive habits as a result of our collective neutralization as a people, which is why we find ourselves doing way more mobilizing than we do organizing, and why we find ourselves having a whole lot of organizations that are not able to do what we call deal with direct synchronization, direct action through synchronization. So we ain't all on the same page at all. Everybody splits off. And just like we heard earlier, even Babu Amawali said, hell, if they don't elect me, I'm going to split off and start my own. We keep subdividing, and by doing so, now we're going to drop off a little bit more of our foundation, and we continually head down the path of deterioration. Last one that we find ourselves in terms of what we see with the community is what we call the denial mechanism, which is based on our inability to let go of being domesticated and clinging on to the abusive relationship that grafted through the breeding of a slave mentality. So the denial mechanism goes into saying, well, when you encounter people that say ain't nothing wrong, we shouldn't even be doing that. We can vote, and just leaving it at that, not realizing what it really means to talk about freedom. And so these are the things that were left off, and even more so, but this is stuff I want to expose now when we talk about the N.B.P.P that was left off of the national level.